Welcome to another podcast. This is the end of November, or approaching the end of November 2021. Dave Downs hosting here. I'm really happy to not only be sitting again with Brian Smith from RASI, but Brent Beatty. Welcome from SevenShifts. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Can't complain.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us today. We're going to talk a lot about labor compliance and really how SevenShifts can help bridge the gap on the compliance side of things. We're going to hear some potential problems that may occur from Brian Smith and some things that our clients may run into. And then we're really going to get the solution side of it from Brent.
A big compliance issue that has popped up recently in more states and has been around in the great state of California for quite some time. But more states are starting to enact these meal and rest breaks that need to be taken. Most states will have some type of law regarding the meal and rest break, but California really takes it to the next step and give employees the tools that they need to go after their employers that don't give them these meal and rest breaks. There's high penalties in California, and there's a lot of record keeping requirements to show and prove that these employees took their meal breaks and rest breaks and took them at the correct time. And keeping up with that is an absolute nightmare, to say the least.
A lot of operators want to provide the opportunity to their employees and want to make sure that they're following those laws and avoiding any compliance fees. So the solution in SevenShifts is really built to kind of simplify that process. Another part of the platform is obviously tracking any of those exceptions or any situations where maybe a meal or rest break was missed. And in the state of California as well, you can have certain agreements in place with your employees to waive their right to take certain breaks. And also, that doesn't apply to every case. So in the event that you have to pay an additional fee, SevenShifts can help you both track and record those instances and make sure that employees are aware that they've happened. So you can stay on top of it, try and reduce the fees and costs in situations, and if not, at least have a good record so that you can pay employees appropriately. And that if for some reason one of those employees comes back to you in the future and says that maybe they weren't given those opportunities, you know that they were, or that they were paid accordingly to avoid situations in the future.
Brian, you mentioned potential penalties. I wanted to kind of scratch the surface on that a little bit. And I know that's probably a wide range depending on the municipality and the area where the restaurant is located.
Well, like Brent was saying, if an employee can't take a break, there is an immediate solution for the employer, and that's to pay the employee an additional hour of work. SevenShifts would identify that, and that would keep the business in compliance, because the California law states that when an employee does not take their break, they're due an additional hour of pay, and that's how they rectify that situation. However, if they're not paying out that additional hour to employees that are not taking that break, fine can be much higher, upwards of $1,000 per instance, and that can add up really quickly. The predictive scheduling laws that are popping up across the country are really causing issues for restaurateurs, because schedules have to be posted a week or two in advance. If you make changes, you have to pay employees an additional amount, a little fine to make changes to their schedule. And if you're making last minute changes, like the day of, the week of, those are even more costly. And with employment in restaurants right now as it is, there's constant turnover. And I know that those schedules are being adjusted on a daily basis for some restaurants because they have no choice. And these adjustments are causing them to have to pay employees a little bit of a fee or a penalty, if you will, to make those changes.
Our tool at a base level, I think, helps ensure that operators are publishing schedules at the right time, giving their employees enough notice, allowing them to store records for things like good faith estimates and other variables or factors that have been communicated to employees in the system, so that schedules are done on time, at least built cost effectively the first time around. With SevenShifts, you have a record of the schedule going out the day it went out, a record of everyone in your business being notified that the schedule was made available. So SevenShifts really helps you simplify the process to understand the additional fees that you may incur as you're making changes to the schedule later in the game, maybe a week before or even the day of. So SevenShifts will notify you when you move a shift on our schedule page and say, hey, if you do this and publish it, you're going to owe 3 employees X amount of dollars, or you'll incur these fees. So you can make some better decisions as an operator.
Not paying overtime to employees that work more than 40 hours in a week, or for example, in certain states like California, they have daily overtime. Anything over 8 hours in one day is overtime. Over 12 hours in one day is double time. So making sure that we're paying the correct overtime rate or double time rate when employees are actually working over those thresholds, that is still a labor compliance issue today. A second item would be, including back of the house in a tip pool when they're not supposed to be included. Knowing when you are allowed to include the back of the house in the tip pool is something that it comes up all the time in recent, because there's such a disparity between the front of the house and the back of the house, and employers are trying to figure out how to get more wages to the back of the house without actually having to incur a higher wage expense.
Overtime is something that our system has kind of built into its core. So again, 2 facets there: prevention and tracking once they do happen, kind of baked into all parts of SevenShifts. If you're moving shifts around or making changes, we'll notify you if those things are happening or what the actual expense of them may be. I guess last but not least, to touch on alerting a little bit more as well. So oftentimes if you're running a restaurant, you're really busy, and whether or not Greg or Adam in the back took a break and took it at their 5th hour of work and before the allotted amount of time, and whether or not you send server A or B home if you have the option or choice to, and which one will actually hit overtime or incur overtime first, how long they've been working, are things that you shouldn't have to keep top of mind, and it's kind of baked into the core of SevenShifts. So we'll notify you as a user of the actions that you should take, and what the implications of not taking those actions are, specifically as they relate to things like overtime and meal and rest breaks, for sure too. You kind of touched on tip pooling as well, which is something that's somewhat new to SevenShifts, and we actually just released our solution for as well. There's a lot to understand and to know in terms of the rules around how you divide and allocate tips between even your front of house staff and servers, if you end up pooling or sharing tips there, and whether or not you can allocate tips from different sources to back of house employees and management employees. So we built a really robust solution that can be customized both to the unique kind of needs or requirements of your business, whether you're full service or quick service, and can also account for different sources of tip revenue, like maybe things like delivery or if you are a full service restaurant, tips that are collected in the front of house. And because we built the system in such a robust way, you can kind of customize which tips are allotted to certain types of employees as an operator, and it gives you a lot of control around setting the rules and allocating tips to the right people, but also automates that whole process away. Like a lot of restaurants we talk to spend almost full hours per day or up to like 15 hours per week just trying to figure out how tips get distributed across all those different areas of the restaurant. So With our solution, you can put those rules in and kind of set it and forget it, and just get a really kind of clean and crisp report at the end of it, and understand all the tips that you took in, who they should be paid and allotted to, and then you don't have to worry about it.
I love that because it's kind of a real life example. I lived in breathed restaurant world. I remember managing tip pools, and that was just front of the house stuff, tipping to support staff, and the hours spent on spreadsheet jockeying and those kinds of things a long time ago. So I'm glad that those kinds of things can be automated, and that's really a good segue too. For both of you, I would like one potentially from each of you, a really good story or a testimonial of something that really did happen in terms of being able to think of a specific example where a client saved a ton of time or even potentially a ton of money in potential savings utilizing some different solutions and really incorporating the 7Shifts into their daily life. Brian, I'll start with you, and then Brent will jump over to you if that's okay.
The real life example that I've worked with, we have a client that was, they were spending upwards of $90,000 a year on their meal and break compliance because they just couldn't keep up with it. They're paying, they weren't even sure if they were paying penalties out correctly. Their mantra was, I'd rather pay a penalty out even if I don't have to, so that I don't get dinged down the road. So knowing when you actually should pay out those penalties is very important and very cost saving. And once they started using 7Shifts, the penalty wages that they were paying out were greatly reduced.
That particular client, I believe, was in the state of California and had some pretty hefty fines and penalties that they were paying in terms of not being able to manage that meal and break compliance. I love that story. $90,000 a year, I think, is what the total savings was. Brent, I know you probably see even more than we do in our client subset. Give me some examples of some times where 7Shifts really stepped in and saved a client a ton of time and or money.
I think time saving and even just assurance or kind of guarantee that these things are being tracked and recorded in the right way has been kind of the biggest impact I think our tool has had on our operators. Helping the managers that are actually working in store understand the laws and actually making a process for them that was very simple to follow that could help them stay in compliance, because as much as their district or regional managers understood what they needed to do, they wanted to make sure that everyone working in the restaurant who could actually take action at the right time understood it as well. The second portion that I didn't really touch on a lot already was actually attestation for employees in the state of California. So a big thing for them was making sure they had record that even if people did take breaks or weren't allotted breaks, that the employee was attesting that they were given the opportunity to, and or that those rules were followed. And this client who we built the solution out for actually ended up coming back to us, I think it was about 9 months after we had launched with their property in California, and was faced with a lawsuit and was looking for those detailed records that would actually help justify for them in court and in legal proceedings that they attempted to follow these rules, and that they had record of them and that their operators were aware of it. I think a lot of the records that they were available to pull from 7Shifts and a lot of the attestation information that we hold within the system was pivotal in them actually being successful in that lawsuit and avoiding more penalties too.
Pretty amazing stuff, guys. I thank you really a ton today for your time and kind of your expertise on being able to understand and identify problems and provide real workable solutions for the clients. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers, guys.